Hello everyone, it's me, OneGamer54, back in the video. Today, we're back to do another theory regarding the upcoming game coming next year, Secrets of the Mimic. So, we already did a video about this, to say the least. I'll leave a link to the previous theory about it in the description box below, but in case everyone already knows it, or you just want to catch up, or, if you don't want to do that, which it hurts, but okay. Um, in the last theory video that we did, I came to the conclusion that the mimic and the puppet have some sort of connection. Saying that the puppet, we're going to see the puppet in Secret of the Mimic, and moving forward, we're going to see that the mimic is essentially going to be the new age puppet, but instead of giving gifts, giving life, he's going to be taking gifts and giving not so life, to say the least. Basically, he's going to be the real life manifestation of Nightmarion, the polar opposite of the puppet. If you want to know more about all that, go check out the previous video because I won't be rehashing it here. But now we come to what I think a lot of people have been wondering about this game. And considering the fact that we also had done a reaction video of the latest game theory video, I believe that this video may have some truths, but this is still speculation. So, let's get to it, shall we? The one thing that I think a lot of people want to know is who exactly are we going to be playing as in Secrets of the Mimic? Because let's be honest now, Fnaf protagonists in games tend to be important. Coming soon we're going to have a book about the phone guy. Even explicitly telling us that the phone guy's name, which we all thought was Scott, was actually named Ralph. Interesting name, but alright, I dig it. And we already know that protagonists are important. They seem to be important to the franchise. We got Michael Afton, who is basically the protagonist for all the FNAF games, all the way up to Pizzeria Simulator. We had William Afton, who we play as an Ultimate Custom Night. We had Tape Girl and Vanessa, who were integral for the new story that FNAF was trying to tell. We got Gregory, who may or may not be Patient 46, who, caused the havoc in the Pizzaplex, and Cassie in Ruin, which we know she kinda let the Mimic out. Yikes. And then we have Casey's dad in Help 1 and 2. Just, filling the gaps between Security Breach and Ruin. And, giving us some context on what's going on. So that Secret of the Mimic has to be important. But who are we going to be playing as in Secret of the Mimic? Well, I have some ideas. So let's just get out the one that I think we don't. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be this guy. But I'm just going to out and say it because I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me for it. What if? I'm not what if, but I'm thinking that for this game they shouldn't bring back Michael Afton. Now I know, a lot of people are gasping. A lot of the, Afton family supporters out there are just grabbing their pitchforks and telling me why you think that Michael Afton shouldn't be here. Michael Afton has been in the games for like a lot, but it's like with this new story that FNAF's trying to tell, especially with the Mimic, I feel like if we bring in Michael, it just feels off, Like, so you mean to tell me that Michael was perfectly content in just passing on, thinking his mission is successful when the Mimic is still out there? Granted, we saw in the Fall Fest that Fall Fest end up in flames, so maybe Michael Afton believed that the Mimic passed away already. So he thought that he already covered loose ends, and so he was perfectly content, not knowing that the mimic is still alive. But other than that, it's like, why? I mean, sure, the opportunity to play as a teenage Michael will would be interesting to say the least. With a teenage Michael, not rotten flesh Michael, but a Michael who was before the events of him bullying his brother. Maybe we get some insight with the Afton family, and maybe we may know something about him, but other than that, not really much to go off, to be honest. And I know some people are gonna say, well, we didn't know anything about Cassie either, but she was alright, and you're right. But it's like the thing to me is like basically the Afton family is done. Finito. Gone. Elizabeth Afton ain't coming back. Crying Child ain't definitely not coming back. And Michael Afton, his story came to a nice end. Yeah, William Afton's still out there, but technically speaking, that was just, a mimicking software just copying the behavior of William Afton. So it's like, technically, he's still an HE double hockey stick. So basically, the Afton era is done. Finito. Nothing to go off of. So if we go back to the past, so if Secrets of the Mimic start bringing in the Afton family, then it wouldn't really feel right, you know? But what other characters would be there to play as? Well, I mean, let's be honest. We're right now in a circus theme, so it has to be something. Because the Mimic had to, at some point of this game, has to see a tragedy. I don't know, maybe someone, heck, maybe even William Afton, if you want to continue the trend of William Afton being so obscurely evil that he's just doing things way before the Bite of 83, but the Mimic needs to witness some tragedy to make him like this sort of monster that he is. And while I could sit here and say that maybe we could play as a live William Afton, I mean, I guess it would be interesting to play William Afton again, but this time alive, and I guess interesting to see like the old villain of Fnaf facing the new villain of Fnaf. Just wouldn't really, you know, feel right. Henry could be a possible character, to be honest. I mean, like, Henry is one of the most important characters out there, and yet we don't play as Henry. So, would Henry be our protagonist, and would Henry be the protagonist of Secrets of the Mimic? I mean, it's not too far of a stretch. We could know more about Henry and such, but I mean, like, and I mean, it would work too. If Henry is the one who basically is responsible for the robots, he would think it would set up a nice story of, Henry was the one who created the mimic. Well, he and William are. And maybe if William Afton did something, maybe William Afton sabotaged the AI of the mimic or the schematics of the mimic, and the mimic is now just going after, everyone. What like I'm pretty sure through this game, I feel like the mimic is just trying to like hug or something. Like, how there's, I mean, if we're looking at a jester costume, you would think that, oh, I'm here to entertain you, while everyone else is just thinking, oh no, this man is trying to chase us. But what if? But yeah, I feel like the mimic. I don't know. It's like, it just feels like Henry could be our protagonist, but I got another one. And it does fit well, in a sense, but I know a lot of people are gonna start saying that I've lost it. But stay with me on this one, because I think you might want to hear this one out. I propose that what if in Secrets of the Mimic we play a character that we know had existed. We are playing as someone who is just as important as all the other characters that we have been playing and have heard of through the entire history of Five Nights at Freddy's. Someone so important and yet off the grid that people still are begging for their return. What if in Secrets of the Mimic we're playing as Mrs. Afton? Now I know, a lot of you are going to say that that's it, I've lost it. But hear me out on this one. For all we know, Mrs. Afton has just been missing. You know, she's been missing and hasn't been revealed since in Five Nights at Freddy's. And for a lot of people, we just have assumptions that she was divorced, like she divorced with William. Maybe William Afton killed her and stuffed her into Ballora, or maybe taking her soul and put it in Ballora. Regardless of how you want to see it. But the fact of the matter is, we just don't have a concrete, like 100% concrete answer of what happened to Mrs. Afton. And just look at the date that we're dealing with here. We are dealing with 1979. Basically, we're in the middle where Fall Fest is now revealed to the public, which is 1970, but it's also before the events of 1983, which is the most important date because that's the bite of 83. The bite of 83. The one where Crying Child dies in the mouth of Fredbear. And one thing that strikes me is, where's the mother in all this? You would think the mother would try and do something. Heck, you would think that we would know something about the mother. I mean, we practically know everything from the father, which is William Afton, Michael Afton, the older brother, Crying Child, the one we play as in the minigames, and Elizabeth Afton, who, let's be honest, we don't see her. We don't see her, but we do enter her room. Everything is right there. But suspiciously, we never know what happened to Mrs. Afton. So what if Secret of the Mimic is now going to show us what happened to Mrs. Afton? Again, I know it sounds crazy and it's like, really? Mrs. Afton, that's who you're choosing. That's who you're choosing to be the protagonist in the game, Juan. Like, I know it doesn't make sense, but really think about it. We know that from Help 1 and 2 with the carnival games, anything related to Fall Fest, it always ends with a fire. Every single time. Anything related to Fall Fest, especially everything that's related to the Fall Fest, always ends up in burning. So that's already telling us that in Secrets of the Mimic, we know that the official ending, if there is just multiple endings, we know that the true ending is that Secrets of the Mimic is burning down. So what if Secrets of the Mimic could be about Mrs. Afton? Maybe Mrs. Afton was trying to look for something. Or maybe Mrs. Afton is trying to look for someone. Yes. It's always striking, and honestly, with the new game theory, there has been a passing comment about a pain first directed to me. That line, it always struck me, and honestly, now I'm being reminded of it, it does really put into question, what did Henry mean by that? Basically, if we're leading to believe what this new era of Fnaf is telling us, Charlie Emily, the person who possesses the puppet, wasn't the first victim. It was Susie all along. Which I don't know why we had to change that, but regardless. So the fact that Charlie isn't the one who didn't get the first if she wasn't the first wound, who was the first wound to Henry? What type of what damage did William Afton did to Henry that wasn't his daughter? Well, there can only be one other possibility, or maybe two. Either Sammy Emily or Mrs. Emily. Yes, I am proposing that the mimic in some way may have, I don't know, may have done something to Mrs. Afton. May have done something to Mrs. Emily. Maybe did something to Sammy Emily, or heck, maybe done both. And the and what I'm proposing is that in this game we play as Mrs. Afton trying to find Mrs. Emily and Sammy Emily. And in the end of the game, unfortunately, as it's foretold for every single Fnaf game, it doesn't end well. We end up burning alongside with Fall Fest. A first wound inflicted to Henry by William, taking his wife and his son in the fire of their own place. Now again, I know it sounds like wishful thinking. It sounds like bananas. It sounds crazy to say the least. Why would I propose that Mrs. Afton, as well as Mrs. Emily and Sammy Emily, are going to be important to this game? Because I know some of you are going to pull up with the fact that, actually, Juan, Sammy Emily never existed in the book. Never existed at all. Or in the books, Mrs. Emily left Henry because he was so work dependent. How could she be here in the games? And you're right. But let's really be honest here. I wouldn't really pass up the whole Henry and William Afton facing their tragedies here in Fall Fest. You know, if they are supposedly the owners of this circus theme place, then yeah, they're going to lose something. They're going to lose their establishment, but let's be honest, would Henry really consider losing a business as a wound first afflicted to him? You think they'll lose a business? That's your business. That's what you're getting your revenue, your money on, but theoretically speaking, there's no missing kids yet. So Henry could still make his money back. But what if the wound he's talking about is a personal one? One that cuts very deep to his heart. Maybe, say, losing the love of his life and losing Sammy, his own son. Now, with the Fall Fest, now that knowing that the Fall Fest will catch on fire, and it was that accident of '79, the Fall Fest, the Secrets of the Mimic, is what takes away his wife and his son, then yeah, it would explain why Henry would make precautions and make the security puppet to always look after his daughter. Maybe Sammy went off. Or maybe Henry wasn't looking and it resulted with his wife getting kidnapped by the Mimic. With Mrs. Afton basically going back and trying to help him. Because it's looking like the Afton family were close at one point. So I'm starting to believe that in Secrets of the Mimic, Mrs. Afton, out of the goodness of her heart, is trying to look for her friend, Mrs. Emily, who also has her son, Sammy Emily. But through those many nights, we're going to see that, yeah, the Mimic, that jester guy who always makes us laugh, yeah, the jester isn't here to make us laugh. Let's just say you can't spell slaughter without laughter, to say the least. And as we try to avoid the Mimic and possibly the puppet, we discover and found Mrs. Emily and Sammy Emily, only for a fire to break out, which causes the death of both Mrs. Afton, Mrs. Emily, and Sammy Emily, burned to the fire alongside with the Mimic. thus inflicting the two wounds to both William Afton and Henry Emily. Henry losing his wife, his son, and basically the whole business. And William go and with William, yeah, it would sting a bit. That would explain why William doesn't have a wife anymore. Why now it's the brother taking care of the crying child. And why William Afton would even go so far and put a nanny cam on the Fredbear plush that his son's carrying. He wasn't paying attention to his wife, and now his wife's gone, possibly through his fault. So that's what I'm predicting what could be. So to clarify, I'm thinking in Secrets of the Mimic, we're going to be playing as Mrs. Afton, basically trying to sneak through at night, because, well, it's 5 nights. We're going to know more and more of we're trying to find Mrs. Emily and her son. But we're not alone in this. We're not alone in this dark theme circus, because the Jester and possibly every other animatronic here are out to get us. And it will be our job to maneuver our way through safely and find the clues necessary to free Mrs. Emily and her son, only for the dark truth to reveal that in the end the fire breaks out, taking down, basically burning everything to the ground, taking 3 people from 2 families, and with that accident caused a chain reaction of all the tragedy that follows. And that's what I think is going to happen. Do I necessarily believe this is to be the case? But I'll be honest. If anyone are saying that I'm crazy on this, heck, I wouldn't even blame you for saying that. But if you really think about it, if this game does follow the way exactly, with Mrs. Afton being the protagonist, us trying to find a mother and a son, and the whole full fest burning down, it really does clear up all the loose ends. We know who Mrs. Afton is. We'll probably know her name. We know pretty much what happened to Henry's wife and son, and basically that would set up the events. Do I think it's necessarily going to happen? No, it wouldn't really, but it would loose up nice ends from the past, so that we can finally look into the future. Now, before I even say goodbye, I know what you guys are going to say. But Juan, like we said before, we just told you that in the books, Henry's wife left him because he was a workaholic. Or Sammy didn't exist in the books. Yes, I know, the books. But let's be honest on this one. I think now the books, they're trying to reimagine it, to say the least. Like, don't get me wrong. The reason why we know who the Mimic was in Ruin is because, well, we read the books. We know who the Mimic is. But let's be honest, with the Mimic in the books and the Mimic in the games, they're looking a little bit different. Heck, I feel like they're trying to change it up a bit. They're trying to make the game version of the Mimic to be a little bit different from the Mimic that we know from the epilogues and tales of the Pizzaplex. And that's what I'm thinking they're going to do here. So, well, yes, in the books, Mrs. Emily leaves Henry and takes their son Sammy. I feel like in the games, it's going to be that there was more like to death do we part in a sort of way, with Mrs. Emily potentially going up in flames alongside with Henry and William's Fall Fest. Do I necessarily think that it's going to be happening? No, but it's an interesting take, which I hope you guys can probably let me know in the comment section below. What do you guys think? So make sure you like the video so I know you guys enjoy. And I'm gonna be honest, I am not ready to see what the comments are gonna flame me about, but oh well. This is 1Gamer54 signing off.